start off and just introduce yourself, and then we'll all go through and take turns.
Sure. So my name is Shannon Robnett. I'm a I'm a builder and developer in Boise, Idaho. And before you start making potato jokes, you need to Google Boise, Idaho and see what's going on. We got one of the hottest economies in the nation. I've been doing what I've been doing for about 30 years, and we've got a great team, and we put up multifamily industrial products, and we'll talk about all that stuff later. Thank you for having me, Emma.
Yeah, awesome. I think that ground up development is just one of those things that intimidates a lot of people, whether they're active trying to build it or passive trying to understand it, and how getting paid if you're a passive investor in that works. And so, but it's sexy. Everybody wants to do it. So we all want to learn more about. I will go next. Just real quick, my name is Emma Powell. I'm a multifamily syndicator. We do heavy value adds on mid-size to large multifamily, in the 50 unit range. We got a project that Frank and I are working on together in Idaho, again, on the other side of the state. And just looking for another partner to finish the rehab on that one. We've got it started, got it closed. Everything's going awesome. And I'd like to see if we can find one more partner to inject some more capital into that, so we can kind of get it finished up. And then let's see. Oh, gotcha, Devin. Anyway, we just closed on 34 units in Little Rock, Arkansas, in a joint venture with some new investors who were looking to get some hands-on experience. So they placed the capital, and we're basically all getting our hands dirty on that one together. So that's the kind of stuff that we do. Would love to do some ground-up stuff. I've looked at several projects. Looking at one right now, and I think that it's a great opportunity in a lot of different markets. But I just feel like it's a little too big for me to handle right now. So that's me. Anybody want to volunteer to go next?
I'll go next. This is Chris Kelly. I live in Seattle, Washington, but born and raised in Boise, Idaho, a family in Boise. I own about 15 rental properties in Oklahoma. I own a triplex in the Seattle, Washington area, and looking to do some investing in other parts of the country, and also looking at doing some multifamily and possibly doing some capital investing, maybe using my 401k, self-directed, things like that.
Awesome. Chris, what part of Seattle are you from?
I live in Puyallup right now.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I grew up in Covington, graduated from Kentwood. Yeah, so most of my family's still in that area.
Right.
Nice to meet you. All right, who's next? Frank, go for it.
So this is Frank from the Cash Flow Kings. I live out east in the great state of Rhode Island, and I invest just about everywhere. I have smaller multifamily, single families, and commercial in the Rhode Island market, about 50 units. But I'm also involved in about 9 syndication deals across the country, a GP on 2 of them, one in Amarillo, Texas, and one in Idaho. I like the Pocatello market a lot, being so close to Salt Lake City, Utah. And, mostly right now doing some flips here or there locally, buying some stuff nationally. We just invested in a ground-up development in Texas. And maybe at some point, Shannon will talk me into doing one of his deals. I'm just not ready yet, but we'll get there.
Yeah. I'm gonna introduce
You make
Devin
that sound like a challenge, Frank.
I figured I'd get you going.
Challenge accepted, my friend. Challenge accepted.
Nice. That's what we're here for. So Devin just popped in the chat and said he's outside at a very loud soccer practice for his kids, and so I'm just going to introduce for him. He's local here in Salt Lake City, lives just north of Salt Lake. I met him about a year ago at an investor meetup, and we were talking about, like, with stars in our eyes, like, let's go do a bigger project. So he just got approval from the city of Ogden, which is just north of Salt Lake, for 104 units ground up there, and is just learning his way through the ropes. It's awesome. And his wife just had a baby, I think, Tuesday. So, yep. So congratulations for your new baby. And looking forward to seeing kind of what you guys are up to on your project too. That's going to be interesting to watch. Okay, so thanks for hopping in, Devin, even though I know you're you're a super busy guy with the kids and the soccer and the giant development. Okay, who wants to hop in and introduce themselves next?
I'll go. I'm Jason Terry from the Salt Lake City area as well, just north, a little farther north in Layton. I actually lived in Puyallup for about 8 years, so small world, small city. But right now I'm just trying to get into more active into multifamily. So I've been kind of learning the ropes of some of the multifamily stuff and joining up with Rod Cleef's program and some networking there with people in that program. And yeah, just trying to get some experience, get into maybe like a JV deal, freeing up some capital from current single family. So
Nice. Good to have you again, Jason.
thanks.
All right, who's next? And if anybody does not want to go, just pop it in the chat and just put your contact information if you don't want to take your turn on the hot seat.
I can go next. This is Kathy Fortin. I am outside of Broomfield or Denver, Colorado right now. I got into real estate, I'm not sure how many years ago, but originally as a hard money lender, a self-directed IRA. And then since then, Chris, who introduced himself earlier, kind of introduced me to people that he knows through his rental properties that he's had. And so now I have 5 long-term rentals and have done 3 flips so far here in the Denver area, and just have always had interest in multifamily. So wanted to network with people and just learn more about that.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks for coming. I don't think we've met before, Kathy. Have we met at a conference or?
I don't believe so.
Okay. I go out to Denver every once in a while for that kind of stuff. So next time I'm there, let's definitely try and hook up and talk about what we got going on.
Perfect.
Awesome. All right, who's next?
I can go next. I'm Sairam Kota. I'm from Dallas, Texas. I sponsored around 900 doors around DFW and invested around and passively around 1,000 doors. We are managing, our properties are in 2 in Fort Worth, 1 in DeSoto, all in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. I want to go into construction. It's like so I want to venture into construction and do more of this. I was doing more of the Class C kind of thing, apartments. Want to do more of construction. I'm willing to partner with someone who has experience with it and go forward.
Nice. So you sound like you have a lot of experience in multifamily. It's kind of a natural step for you to start doing the ground up stuff.
Yeah, I want to go into ground up. Yeah.
Yeah. No. Yeah. Awesome. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
All right. Who do we have left that would still like to take a turn?
I guess I can go next. My name's Alex. I'm from New Jersey, and I'm a 15-year-old real estate enthusiast. I'm really just here to learn more about all I can. I really have my eyes set on a career path in, well, mostly multifamily investment and development. So I'm really excited to be here.
Awesome. All right. And then, like I said, everybody go ahead and pop your contact information and just your quick elevator pitch in the chat. And so everybody can copy and paste that. We can continue to talk after the meeting's over as well. So we'll stick all that in there as we're going along. Anybody else would like to take a turn? Just kind of what you have to offer and what you're looking for in your business.
Can anybody hear me?
I can hear you.
Oh, good. Sorry, we took a hit with the storm yesterday, and it knocked out my camera, and I thought it got my my microphone too. So those are on their way from Amazon, but they won't be here today. So my name is Diana Hoff. I live in Boise, Idaho, and I work for Mountain West IRA. And what we do is we help our clients invest in real estate. I have clients who do everything with their IRA funds, from investing in promissory notes to purchasing properties outright everything from single family to multifamily. I even have several people who invest in mobile home parks in their IRA. So it's amazing what you can do in your IRA. And I spend a lot of time trying to connect my clients with people that they can invest in or people that can help them find the properties that they're looking for.
That's cool. We're looking at, I have somebody who just asked me to look at a mobile home park recently. I've never really looked at it much before, but it's kind of exciting, the opportunities there. And it's a lot easier ground up if you're going to just start from scratch in a park. A lot less construction stuff to learn about. But
absolutely.
Do you find that zoning can be difficult to try and get new parks approved?
It depends on where you are. If you're, for instance, if you're in Boise proper, you might have a little more challenge. But if you're out in Kuna, Star, it really depends on where you are.
Okay, so there's still opportunity there for new parks.
Absolutely.
Okay, that's cool to know. All right, do we have anybody else who has not taken a turn yet that would like to? All right, going once. We'll have Shannon kind of pick up, going twice. All right, so yeah, we'll have you just kind of tell us what you're up to, what you're doing, what you've learned, what we need to know, either as active or passive investors when we're getting involved in these kinds of projects, and then like I said, afterwards we'll ask some questions and continue to just chat about, see where we're going with all our businesses. All right, take it away, Shannon.
Okay. Thanks, Emma. Really glad to be here. So my story started many years ago when I was growing up. My mom was a real estate agent. My dad was a builder and a developer. And I just always saw things happening at the kitchen table. I think I knew what a 1031 was before I had my driver's license. It was just natural growing up. So that was kind of my career path. I was looking at going to college. My brother was building 3 houses a year back when we used to build everything about them. We used to build the cabinets. We used to hang the doors. We used to paint them inside and out. And I was looking at him at building houses and making about $45,000 a year in 1996. And I thought, man, college is not for me. So I jumped back into the construction world, which I'd grown up in. And I just kind of saw that there was 2 things I could do. One, I could build for people, and that was worth what I could get for my wages, or I could build for wealth. And that was where I could create something that, as we all know, with cap rates and things like that, you can create a value in something that isn't there with just the sticks and stones. And so I saw that as I was able to hone my skills as a developer, I was able to see value not only in the project I was going to build, but in the land I could acquire, I could rezone, and I could then put together the whole package and present that to someone. Or I could I could build that out as my own. And what I saw was there was just another level there where there was money to be made. If you're buying just a regular lot in a subdivision, somebody's already built that, somebody's already made money on the lot, and you're going to take the next step. And a lot of people don't like to take the risk of doing the lot, the subdivision, so they just buy one, right? So when I started applying that to income producing property, as we all know, income producing property trades irrelevant of the cost. And when you look at the difference, and what everybody sees is that the value add is where most of the multifamily syndication has happened in the world as we know it. And the reason that a lot of that has happened is because it's a little bit easier it's a lot easier to get financing on because there's already income, and banks like income. They like to see that there's something stable there. The thing that happens with most value add apartment complexes is you're out there, you're buying somebody else's 1973 Motel 6, and you're putting another coat of lipstick on the pig, and you're going to rebrand it, and you're going to put it back out in the marketplace, and you're going to do what everybody calls is forced depreciation. And that means that after you buy it at retail, or very close to retail, and after you put a CapEx into it to make it worth $100 a unit more, then you are going to make the project worth more money. But what happens when you can't do that? What happens when you are unable to make that happen? Then that is where people can get into trouble with value add, because we've seen, and I'm not saying that anybody in this group would be silly enough to do this, but we've seen people pay absolutely top dollar for something and then put the CapEx into it. And we've seen people do things like that that didn't quite make sense just to say that they have it. The other thing that a lot of multifamily value adds do is that when you get involved with a value add, there is a time period of, let's say from the time you purchase it till you get all your value add done and you force the appreciations and everything like that, you could be 18 months before you start getting your regular payments. And at that point, you'll get the catch up, and that's really great. But before that, things might be a little bit sketchy because you're adding to something that you paid retail for. So those are a couple of things that aren't in ground up. The thing with ground up is that you can't really just go buy a lot for ground up. So you have to find a parcel that needs to be usually annexed and rezoned, and you need to deal with the neighbors in the cities, and maybe there's some off-site improvements of roads that need to be built and things like that. So there's some bigger picture things that you have to figure out. But the real benefit when you look at ground up is that a ground up project is taking the pre-assembled product and it's assembling it and putting the tenant in it that adds the value. And the reality is, when you look at it, I'll give you an example with a project we have going right now. We're breaking ground on it next month. We have a project that is 36 units. It will be a project that I built before, same floor plans. We will be building that project. We'll be building 3 separate 12-plex buildings. We'll do that in 9 months. When we begin that project, we will start that. We have $5.3 million in costs to build that project. But we have a CBRE evaluation, a separate appraisal that we had done back in December that says that when that project is built and when that project is full of tenants at today's rent in December, that project is worth $6.3 million. So instead of trying to take something that is already known in the marketplace, maybe it's in a different, an older part of town or something like that, you're building brand new, and you know what you're going to be at if you can achieve the rents that people were achieving before you started your project. So it's kind of like the way that the valuation is set up is that you're looking kind of backwards, because you're looking at yesterday's rents in tomorrow's world with today's construction costs and methods and look and feel. And so we're able to build and compete with granite countertops and vinyl plank flooring and 9-foot ceilings and really nice balconies with our neighborhood that has none of that. It has 25-year-old product. It has 9-year-old carpet. It has all of the things that we're not. And so when you look at the idea of the brand new, you are able to eliminate a lot of the fun that Emma and Frank like to have with the project by replacing the counters and the kitchens and the floors and the heavy value add. What that means is heavy lifting. That means heavy paint. That means heavy demo, right, Emma? And so there's a lot of that doesn't happen. What's that?
Oh no,
you're off again, Emma. We can't hear you.
I was just saying, I like the heavy value add, and I like the construction management, and that's kind of what tells me that I might like ground up, because if you hate doing that construction aspect of it, maybe ground up's not the right fit. But if you love it, then there's more.
Yes. No, and I agree with that. And see, one of the other things that we do that what 30 years in the construction business has taught me is that I don't work in a normal construction environment where I bid everything out and I really grind for the lowest number and I push to make things work. When I start drawing my set of plans, and to give you an example, my last set of plans for 191 units with my civil engineering, my mechanical, my electrical, my plumbing, my structural, and my architectural ran me right about 450 grand. But when I start drawing that set of plans, I start my subs involved in that set of plans. And I'll give you an example. The first project I did, the first 12-plex I did, when the plumber came in, he had 13 penetrations coming through the concrete. That meant that there were 13 different ditches that he had to dig. There was all this other stuff that had to happen, and there was all these penetrations that had to get lined up from floor to floor to floor. When I did this latest set of plans, I brought my subcontractors in and I got them with the engineers, and I began to make everybody work together for the value that we could create. Because what I did was I set my budgets for my subcontractors based on what I had to have for pricing in order to make my project come off at the numbers I wanted. When we got to the end of the day, my plumber brought one pipe up out of the floor and fed it up to the bottom of the floor joist and then ran along the bottom of the floor joist instead of penetrating the floor so many times. So he saved himself a lot of labor, and he was able to bring his price down and meet the budget that I needed to have happen. So there's a few things like that you can do where you can really put yourself ahead of the game instead of feeling like, well, I'm going to get this bid out and I'm going to go with the low bid, and then you play the change order game, and everybody's been involved with that, where the guy shows up and he opens up the wall, and then there's all this other stuff that goes with it, and we have to go deeper, and there's mold here, and there's all those things. But this is kind of the same thing, but what you're doing is you're involving all your subcontractors so that you can actually set your costs to fit the budget you have to hit to make your project work. So really what you're doing is, from the day you decide that this piece of ground is going to be your new beauty, you set your budget and you say, if I can get a valuation of this last project is right at about finished value is about $44.5 million. So we said that if we're going to have a $44.5 million project, we have to be able to build it for $30 million. Okay. So we created our budget, and we knew where we had to be with our budget when we started. So then we went back to the plumber, the electrician, everybody got in line, and we began to build our project to hit that number. See, so what you do is you take some of that systemology that you would bring in from a value add, where you know what the number is because you know what the rent is, and then you know what you can get by looking at the projects around you as far as what value you can add and what the neighbor's getting for that kind of a value, and you do that same sort of thing. So you're not going into a neighborhood or into an area and you're building blind. You're creating the value as you go along. And one of the very first things that I always do is, when I think I know that this is going to be my next project, I go ahead and I order an appraisal. And they're about $3,500. But I order that appraisal because it will tell me what I will lie to myself about. I might tell myself that the rents in this area, they could be $1,600. But the appraiser will get on the phone and he will call the 9 complexes around me, and he won't lie to me or the bank, and he'll tell me that they're only worth $1,450. So I have a couple of check marks in there that really help me to not get over my skis as I'm building the ideology of this project. So now I know what I'm doing. I'm going into the city. I know the amount of units I have to get on this project to make sure that it pencils for the seller, for the buyer. It pencils for the city. It gets me the amenities built in that I want. It does all the things that I have planned in my head to meet all the things in the guidelines. And then from there, you're moving it on through planning and zoning. You're getting your approvals from the city, and you're developing your set of plans. It's at that point that you have a full set of plans, that you have everything about the project ready to go, that then I begin the process of syndication, where I'm reaching out to investors, I'm reaching out to develop or other passive investors that want to be a part of the project. So there's a lot that goes into a ground up that is just that groundwork to get you to a point that you could actually begin the financing process and the fundraising process that is part of what keeps a lot of people away from this end of the game. Because when you look at buying somebody else's project, you're able to say, hey, give me your T12 and your profit and loss, and I'm going to go over here and sit in a corner, and I can analyze whether or not I can buy your property, and then I can give this to my banker, and we can have a loan going here in a couple of days. There's a lot more that goes into that process, but the other side of that is these are all calculated things that if you know what the steps are, they're not that difficult to do. And the other thing is that at every level, there's a profitability threshold that gets crossed. So let's take, for example, the project we're starting in Nampa. Okay, I paid $200,000 for a lot that would allow me to build 36 units on it. I got it entitled. The appraiser said that property is now worth $350,000. I got the plans drawn on it. I got the other things. Then the appraiser said, well, now it's worth $450,000. So I, as the general partner, was bringing in not $200,000 that I paid, but I was bringing in a value of $450,000. So you're able to bring your profit center along with you every single step of the way. Now, I have probably had, just in the last 30 days, probably 15 phone calls trying to buy that piece of land from me with the building permits on it. And I'm pretty confident I can get about $5.25 or $550,000 for that piece of property, because it's completely entitled. It has a set of building permit plans. I don't even have to do anything more than that, and I have the opportunity to make money. If I want to take that forward, then I take it into the typical syndication process, where I then begin to bring in my my limited partners that begin to bring the capital together. And in a typical situation, we're looking at a 65% loan to value, 75% loan to cost, which, as a lot of you know, when you're looking at the value add, you're able to get higher dollars than that. You're able to get more than that because the bank is betting on the cash flow. One of the things that we will see how it shakes out is what kind of reserves you guys are going to need to be bringing into deals when you move forward with Fannie Freddie financing and some other things like that, which I'm not really watching that very much, because when we do ground up, we bring in reserves that carry us for the construction period, and for 12 months beyond that for a lease-up period. Now, obviously, on a 36-unit deal, we wouldn't bring in 12 months. But in the scenario where we've got 191 units that we're starting in August, we have a 12-month beyond the construction period to take us through the rent-up. Now, if you guys look, there's a gentleman on the podcast tonight, Jeff Allen, that didn't want to say anything, but Jeff Allen is my property manager genius. And Jeff he and his team are pretty amazing. And what I see that he does is what I think has been kind of our special sauce in how we are a little bit different than most. Because when Jeff and I got together, I was terminating a property management company that I didn't like. And we were behind the curve, and Jeff and I were doing some weeknights and some weekends trying to get everything off the ground and get him up and running, because I had 180 units that were coming online. They were, and we were behind schedule on lease up, and we didn't have any pre-leasing, and we were, bam, there was Jeff, and he was going. But what we began to figure out was that by taking a matrix of everybody that was around us, we were able to look at every apartment complex has a plus and a minus, and everybody had something that was better than ours, and we had something that was better than them. But what we decided early on was that we wanted to make our lease ups about a decision, about $35. So Jeff had the mandate that he was always to be $35 more than the competition. The reason that we did that is when you, Emma, take $35 times 180 units at a 5 cap, that's over $2.5 million that you can create an additional value. But the other thing that you do is you got a tenant that wants to be there. He's not chasing the next $99 move-in special down the road. Okay. Now this would be something you could do with value add as well. But when we were doing our lease ups and we were taking advantage of those things with our brand new product, we didn't have any of the, well, that's not what the other guys did. That's not what, we were brand new in our area. So we didn't have anybody pushing back. Everybody that was in our spot was paying these rents, or maybe they were new. And Jeff, I remember there was one time Jeff got in trouble because they leased 13 units in 1 week, and I was upset because he didn't catch the price increase that was supposed to happen after unit number 10. But that's the way that we lease up. So we don't necessarily get in a hurry because we have the bank reserve already built in that you don't normally have with the value add, because the value add has the stabilized tenancy in there usually. And so the bank doesn't have to figure that in. So we've got the advantage that we can set the tone for how we fill our units that a lot of times you don't get the opportunity to do if you're not doing a ground up development. So as you begin to pull all those things together, you can really change the trajectory of how your project is coming online, because you're really making it about choices. Jeff does some other things that increase the values as we go along. And so we've always been able to shoot for high teens and usually hit high 20s on our returns, just because we're able to get the ancillary income up, because we're offering things that are not usually available with our sister or our surrounding products, because they're 5 years old, or that's not the way they do it over there, or they have more of a corporate leasing mentality where they hurry up and get everything full, and then every year the tenants all move out because they're looking for the next $12 special. So when you look at value add versus ground up in the next 12 months, you're going to see that the banks are pulling back from both a little bit. But the real reality is that I would look really hard at being able to take the same project in the same neighborhood and add $100 value to it, with where cap rates are taking things, where the banks want to see additional reserves, and where your competition may just be trying to hang on to the tenants that they already have. So you may see rates go stagnant for a while. Whereas with ground up, the safety net that you have that nobody really considers is that you're always working on, by the time you're done, you're always working on 12 to 15-month-old pricing with where you need to be. So you've got a pretty big safety net built into ground up that most people don't consider. Combine that with the fact that you've got the interest reserves already figured in from the bank, and all of that is built into your cost. So the reality is there's a lot of safety that is actually built into ground up that you don't have necessarily with value add, because you're not discovering new things. You're not hoping that you don't lose your new AC units every, you want them to last, where everything in ground up, your returns are pretty locked in because you've got all brand new stuff. So it's very easy to calculate what happens with ground up. Some of the pitfalls with ground up are your contractor. I know this because I've been in construction for a long time. There's always the change order game. There's always the, well, what about this or what about that? And that can be eliminated several ways with how you contract your contractor, as far as making him a partner in how the contract plays out and how he comes in on cost versus trying to get a change order out of you for every single little thing. The other thing that I like with my value or with my ground up developments is I develop a series of plans that all are basically the same. They just look a little different from the outside. So I'm repeating the process. And obviously, by the time I get done, I built 180 units of one brand. I'm getting ready to do 36 more in Nampa, and it's the exact same floor plan with a different exterior look. I know that cost very, very well. So I have that advantage because I know what everything's going to cost, and I'm trying to take that variable out instead of coming up with a new design every time and a new look and a new floor plan. You tend to go more along the lines of what a track home builder does and build the same thing again and again and get pretty good at it, so that you can then begin to scale that, and you can use the same contractor, the same subcontractors, and get the same pricing, even though prices in the area and prices in the market are continuing to escalate. There's the economy of scale because we've done this before. So that is kind of how ground up is done in kind of a 20-minute overview. So, there's a lot that that people think goes into it. Most of it is done in the planning stages, and that's usually where most people fail to endeavor. Is they don't like Emma, your friend that just got that 104 approved. That's the hardest part of doing a ground up project, is getting it approved, getting it through the city. After that, it all becomes very systematic.
So,
make sense?
Yeah. So can you guys hear me?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Okay. So from an investor standpoint, one of the things that I've been running into with a value add is people know that they're not going to get paid for 6 to maybe 12 months, 9 months or so when our first distribution goes out, because there's just a lot of construction, a lot of things happening. When do you start paying your investors on a ground up development? What's the timeline there? Because if I'm already trying to sell them like first distribution at 6, 9, maybe 12 months, how much longer is it on a development? And how do you talk to people about coming in early when you're paying soft costs and there's really nothing that's even existing? When are they finally going to get paid? How do you have that conversation?
Well, no, it's actually, we put it in writing. We don't have a conversation because we don't like people to misunderstand. But there's another, I guess, a very visual concept with ground up that people tend to understand, and we make incredibly clear that our goal in a ground up is to get it built. And one of the things that's interesting about value add is that you're trying to blend some of both. You've got the older investors that are looking for cash flow, and you've got the younger investors that are looking for growth. And you're trying to blend enough cash flow and enough growth to attract both sides. The nice thing about value add the nice thing about ground up is older people don't like it. It's all about growth, okay? And the reality is, what I have done is I have split my syndications in two. So I have a growth syndication where people join me and we build it to stabilize it. Once we stabilize it, then we transition out of it and we sell it to another syndication of mine that then is all about the coupon clippers that want 7%, but they want it now. They don't want to hear about your excuses about how the air conditioning went out or the water line broke underneath the foundation or any of the other stories that I've heard, right? But they're looking for a very stable product that pays them every quarter, and there is no waiting period. So one of the things that I figured out early on is don't combine those two because they don't mix. And ground up really allows you to do that because the people that are in my ground up syndications are understanding that we go from 0 to stabilized and we all get paid. And instead of looking for mid-teens, we're all celebrating high 20s, right? And so the payout is different and the risk calibration is different. And that's why Diana and I are pretty good friends, because a lot of my people come from Diana because they're putting their IRAs to work to grow. And so and I don't know, Diana, I don't know what the exact count is. I think I'm at 4 referrals for you and you have referred me too. So I think we're still working pretty close on that and it's great. But the reality is we do a lot of the growth with IRA people because they want to keep that growing without dealing with the tax benefit or the tax consequences of it. And it's not so much about cash flow. Once we get it stabilized, then I can lower my return to my stabilized syndication because I've got a bulletproof product, right? I've got a brand new roof. I've got brand new concrete. I don't have landscaping that needs to be replaced. My sprinkler system works beautifully, right? I'm all ADA compliant. I don't have any of that to redo. I've got granite countertops. I've got a beautiful swimming pool, and I don't have any of the upkeep that tends to be a little bit scary when you're looking at a long-term hold. And so I think one of the things that I've done in breaking that apart has also made it very attractive, because then I'm only trying to attract one type of person to do the growth. And then I'm only trying to attract one type of person to deal with my stabilized product. And a lot of times as people they age into the game or they get closer to retirement, they start to leave their profits into the second syndication so that they can start to get some revenue off of it and just take their initial investment and move it forward. So that's kind of how I deal with that. And it's kind of a known factor that we are ground up and we pay at stabilization, because we're in the ground up. We're not trying to get people that want the coupon clipping mentality. And so we don't encourage them to participate.
Okay. I love that. That's because you're able to really tailor it, the investment to people that it really fits. And rather than trying to talk people into doing something that might not be a great fit, you have two options that you can give them, and then they get to decide what makes the most sense for style and also timing. That's
right. And then you're not, I think a lot of people get disillusioned because they don't know what kind of fish they are. They want to be a general partner, but they're really just a passive investor. They don't like making decisions. They really want to get the coupon. They want to get the money every month, but they really want to see a 19% return. And they just don't like what happens when they get involved with 19% return deals, because what was supposed to be 6 months and start paying money turned into 9 months, and it really crimped their lifestyle. It changed what they were going to do. And so by taking those two categories apart and going, what kind of investor are you? What do you really want? Then I have found better success in keeping my people happy, because what we're doing is what they want, and they know that there's no payout until this thing stabilizes. But the other thing you have to realize is a 36-unit project is stabilized in 12 months and sold in month 13. In fact, I think I'm breaking ground on the project in July 6th, and I believe we've got an offer coming in on it that's full appraised value next week. So there's that kind of stuff going on in the market. So then it's kind of a no-brainer, because you don't even have to worry about what happens. You've already got the offer. So you can keep it or not keep it depending on what makes sense down the road. Correct. But since I only have one set of syndicators to make happy, we all know that we're all about growth. And the quicker we can get our $6.2 million, the more money we all make. Okay. Yeah. Because think about this, Emma. If you take and you build a ground up development, that development creates $1 million, which is roughly about 19% value it creates in 1 year. Okay. And then the second year, it's going to appreciate by 5%. In 2021, it will appreciate by 5%. Well, when you take 17 and 5 and you average those out, you just shot your return down to 12% in 1 year. Yep. Right? So get out at 17, go get into the next deal, and really that's a 17% on the total project. It's a 30% return because we've only got $1.5 million cash in the deal. Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, like I said, it's a great way to be able to talk to a variety of different kinds of investors and place them in something that is going to work for them. Which is, to me, is always easier to do when you're raising money. It's to just say, well, what are you looking for? What do you want? And then be able to
put them in projects that make sense for their goals. So you got a couple different ways you can go with that.
Right. And that's one thing that I found is very important is to, and Emma, I know you know this, you're not trying to sell anybody anything. You're just showing them the different options that you have. It's like you mentioned at the beginning where your friend was going a different route, but that was what was best for her. And better that she succeed somewhere else, or better that she go somewhere else and have either hopefully a positive experience. But if she doesn't have a positive experience, she at least knows that you didn't make her go into your deal and have her feel uncomfortable the whole time. I've had deals where people have come in. I know they really didn't want to be in the deal. They got in the deal. They were a pain in my butt the whole time. When they got out of the deal, we actually exceeded the return that we said we were by like 1.5%. It wasn't a tremendous thing, but we still exceeded what we had offered on paper. And the whole time the guy's complaining. And then when he gets out, he wasn't even happy at the end of it. The funny thing was he came back to do the next deal, and I told him, I said, this is not going to work. I'm gonna politely decline. But it was because he was not cut out to do what people were telling him to do. You need to go do this syndication. You need to do this. It wasn't his bag. He did not like not being in control. He needed to go own a fourplex and show up on it every Friday and make sure people weren't parking in the street. He was that Mr. Wilson from the Dennis the Menace comic book. That's where he needed to be.
None of us want to be that guy, but some of us are.
Yeah.
So,
and it's even worse when they think you should listen to them.
Yeah. Well, I have a couple of questions I want to kind of kick off the Q&A period. If you guys want to hop in at any point, I just want to kind of give you an example of something that I'm struggling with right now and see what you could recommend. So a lot of us are in the same boat. I say some of us are looking to be passive investors. That includes me. Also looking to be active investors, which also includes me. I'd like to do both. So we're looking at this project right now, and because I don't really feel like I have a good handle on the process, it's tough for me to go out and start making offers on land because I don't really feel like I have my system in place. So what order do you typically go in, or what would you recommend the order we go in if we haven't done this before, as far as putting a piece of land under contract, if it's entitled or not entitled? Should we start out with one that's already entitled to kind of make it a little less to control, a little less to deal with? And then when do we start paying for feasibility study, paying for design costs? When do we start getting the investors to come in who are going to front some of those soft costs, or should we be fronting some of that ourselves? Like just at the very beginning stages when we're just looking at a project and then saying, okay, we're going to do this. What does that look like for a beginner?
So, one of the things that I look at, and it's kind of a rough market gauge, is if I can get $1,500 a door for my rent, I can pay $15,000 a door for my land. Okay. So if I'm buying a 15-acre parcel, and I'll give you an example from my Summertown project. We wanted to get 270 units on it. It was going to be an absolute slam dunk. We were paying $2.8 million for 15 acres. The city, by the time we got done appeasing the city, the neighbors and everything else, we got 191 doors on it with some townhome and some 3-story walk-up. And we got 9 residential building lots. So at the end of the day, I'm in at about $18,000 a door, okay? And I'm going to be getting about $1,750 for my rents on my 3 bedrooms. So it's not a perfect science, but it's kind of a by guess and by golly. The other thing that's also very important with ground is that you make sure that you have ways built in that you get the approvals that you're needing before you have to close, because it's very difficult. I mean, and even if you've got a piece of land that somebody's offering you at $5,000 a door, but you have to close before you can get any of the approvals, I would suggest you pass on it, even if it's a $15,000 a door market, because there's so many variables in getting things approved that you wouldn't want to be stuck with that piece of ground and not be able to use it for apartments. So a lot of that has to do with getting your approvals and getting things dealt with from the city level. And so having a land planner that can plan that out for you, having a basic footprint of the building that you want to build and doing some basic layouts. Feasibility studies, I like to buy those early on. And the reason being is time is money, and the more time you spend sniffing the dirt, dealing with the city, trying to get on a city council meeting, trying to have a neighborhood meeting. I mean, I have other things to do with my life, like organize my sock drawer rather than meet with neighbors, because that's usually a pitchfork and torches festival, and I don't tend to like those. But the reality is, feasibility studies, if you're not willing to put up the $3,500 for one of those, you're going to lie to yourself, or you're not going to have conclusive data from a third party, and it's very difficult to build a foundation, because the reality is they will have the recent sales in the area, they will have the leases that they're getting in the area, they will have the land transactions they will getting in the area. I mean, literally, they will have a week and a half of you gathering data in that report. And I don't know what your time is worth, Emma, but I think $3,500 for a week and a half of your time is about, is of value, because you can do more than that with that time. And so I always look at those that if I really like this piece and I've got it under contract, now's the time, because if my numbers work before I get it rezoned and everything else, I know where I have to be the whole time. And now I'm 24 months later and my numbers still work. My rents have only improved, but doesn't mean that my construction costs have, and I have eliminated and checked off variables off my list. Now I know where the sewer is. I know how much that street's going to cost. I know what I'm going to have to do to appease the neighbors. I know how many units I can get on here, because this is what I got approved from city council. And all of those things are now confirmed against my feasibility study or my appraisal, which I prefer. So all of that comes back to verify and give me one more reason why I should proceed, or I should drop the ball. This is a pipe dream. It's never going to work.
How much should we budget up front to get a project to the point where we can start going and pitching investors? How much should our own businesses or the partnership expect to shell out for these at-risk costs? Earnest money going hard, studies, drawings, application, permitting fees, all of that, legal fees. What should we budget to come out of our own pockets?
Well, I've never had an earnest money not be refundable to me until I have city approval. So
okay.
If you want to talk about that offline, I can show you how to write that contract so that you're not ever at risk on that. Okay. And the other thing that I've always argued is I've argued with the seller, and I've said, why would I want to give you earnest money if the city says no, you have to give it back? It doesn't make any sense for me to set money in an non-interest bearing account with you. So just take this promissory note as my earnest money. And the last deal I did, $2.8 million land purchase, was a $50,000 promissory note up until the city gave me approval. So I didn't have anything at risk. See? Okay. And it's how you structure it, right? So I got this through the city. It's a $44.5 million project I got through the city, with my at-risk cost being less than $14,000. Okay. I had it all approved. I had it ready. I had everything ready. I knew exactly how many units. I knew exactly the zoning. I knew what my rents were, and I had paid my fees for my entitlement report with my appraisal. I paid my city fees to get on the docket for the different reviews that I needed, and I was out less than $12,000. And then I had a pretty quick close after that, because that's what I'd convinced the landowner that I do. If I get these approval, I can close in 60 days, and that's what you do. So okay. At that point, you already have identified that if I get these approvals, will you come in with me? And I always share my GP. right? Because I got to have a sugar daddy, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I've got my camera turned off on purpose. I'm not a handsome fellow, so I've got to have somebody that has a reason to help me out, and that's usually making a money. So, so that's what I do. So I have somebody that comes into my general partnership right now that brings in the money to close the land, and for that, I give them a percentage of my GP.
Do you feel comfortable sharing what that percentage would be for someone who's putting up the land costs? And let's say he's only doing land. He's not coming in and fronting.
It's always variable.
Okay. Just depends on what you can negotiate.
It's always variable. I always start low. They always start high. You know, it depends on how much they love me. You know, but what it tends to wind up being, and here's the other thing, Emma, I just created value, right? I have $2.8 million. It's a farmhouse. I mean, I am across the street from an 80-acre park. I am literally the center of town, right?
Okay.
And I just created value. So the minute I got this property rezoned, I'm paying $2.8 million for it. It's worth $4 million.
Yeah.
So there's that upside. So I'm not putting my buyer or my sugar daddy, my partner, I'm not putting him at a lot of risk. So I'm not giving him a lot of money, right?
Okay.
He's in it for the long haul. But if I'm rezoning this property, we're paying $2.8 million for it, and it only is worth 3.3. There's not a lot there for my guy. So he's going to want more of the general partnership should this thing, you know. So that has a lot to do with it, about how much value are you creating, and what other things are tangible in there, right?
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, because every piece of land is going to be different once you get through that process, how much
Right.
more it's going to be worth. But then it also creates multiple exit points for you to jump ship if you need to at certain points along the project. So creates a lot of safety in a way,
and so
because you're like, sell it at any point.
and then again, right. Then the other thing I was able to do with this particular project, like I said, there was 9 single-family lots. Those single-family lots are worth $100,000 a piece. I was able to pay him back in lots, right? I wish I was paid in gum. Well, I pay my people in lots. But now he is going to receive something that he does not have to pay taxes on. So if you can give I've always found that if you can find that guy that's looking to grow along with you, then he's looking at it going, you know what, I got 3 lots. Shannon, why don't you, when you're building the apartment complex, build me 3 houses, and now I can rent them out, and a year from now I can do a 1031, and I don't have to pay taxes on any of the money that I made working with you. So when you try and find those mutual win-wins on your exit points, it tends to make everybody more money because they're able to get what they need to go to the next place.
Got it. No, yeah, and just being flexible and seeing who you're dealing with, seeing what the project lens, and just being creative on what you work out. Does anybody have any questions that they want to hop in with while we've got them here? I know a lot of us are looking at either doing this kind of project or putting money in this kind of a project. And here he is. Answer your questions. Do we have anything they want to holler?
One of the other things I want to say is when you're doing projects, the first thing that I always look at is how am I getting in and how am I getting out, and what am I going to have to pay in taxes? Because we all have a silent partner in Uncle Sam. And if you're not paying attention, you can wind up giving up a lot of your profits unintentionally by not knowing how you're going to get in and how you're going to get out. I had a conversation yesterday with a gentleman who had just received a rather large inheritance, and he was trying to figure out how he was going to do a project like this. And I was talking to him about how he structures himself to get in and out of deals. And he's now talking with a tax professional about putting his money into a non-qualified IRA which is taxed going in, but it's an inheritance. So there's that whole thing. It's already being taxed. It's going into a non-qualified IRA. He's then going in and out of projects like this. He's not paying taxes on it. He will pay a penalty later on. But if you do the math, are you ahead to have let the money grow without having Uncle Sam's interference for 10 years rather than pay every time you get out of a deal?
Okay.
So that's always something you need to consider. What is your tax consequence at your exit?
Okay. And I've found that even with the value add multifamily, that understanding the tax benefits of investing in this type of project is actually what turns people's heads more than the returns, because what people are looking for is to protect the original capital, but really they could leave it in a bank and protect it better than they could by investing it. So they're actually looking for some benefits, and they think they're looking for better returns, but when they see how much money they can save on taxes, that's when they really start to see how those returns can be enhanced even with that. And so I would say learning or educating yourself, if you're raising money or if you're investing your money, learning those tax implications of what you're talking about. A lot of us tend to gloss over that because maybe we don't like taxes. The more you learn about that, the more you can invest to your advantage, and the more you can talk to your potential investors about the advantages that they have, and they'll be more likely to invest with you because no other vehicle can give them tax advantages like investing in this type of real estate. And a lot of us just don't even know what that is. Correct. And don't know how to explain it.
Shannon, I guess that brings up a question. Is what's a typical investor invest when you're people that, and how do they invest? Are they using IRAs? Are they using cash? Is there a difference? And then just give an example of like minimum that people can put in, the maximum, and returns timeline. I know it varies, but just kind of a generic scenario.
Well, we tend to structure each deal with a fairly specific parameters on all of that. We, if on our smaller deals, I've got investors in my deals from 50 grand to 2.2 million, and I tend to set the $50,000 minimum because I want to be dealing with people who have a little bit more experience with what we're doing. I'm not saying that the person with $5,000 doesn't deserve to be involved, but I'm just saying that if I'm trying to raise $9 million on Summertown, dealing with $500 or $5,000 at a time becomes a blistering headache. So we tend to call it that, but every project that we have has a timeline attached to it, so our investors know what our horizon is. Our project in Nampa is 36 units. That's a 12 to 14 month horizon. Our project at Summertown, that will be about a 30 to 35 month horizon. And so we know where we're going with that. And a lot of times people have a prospectus that isn't clear. I always say exactly what we're going to do, exactly what our strike price is, exactly what our timeline is supposed to be, and exactly what our costs are. So that every month along the way, when I'm producing a report that says we spent $3 million, we're this much under budget, we're this much ahead of schedule, and we're looking like our rents have come along because we've got a report from the properties around us that our rents have improved by about 5% in the market, that gives everybody a clear picture every month as to what's going on, because I believe that communication is the key. And so we try to set that up from the very beginning. So if you get one of our one sheets that says, hey, talk to me about your project, and I'm going to send you a one sheet that gives you a brief overview. If you like that, then I'll get you a offering memorandum that will go into a little bit more detail, but that detail is specific dates that say this is how long it's going to take, and this is how quickly you'll be looking at it, and this is the kind of returns you should anticipate. And usually we're usually projecting high teens to mid 20s, and we usually we don't ever come in under that. We don't miss.
Do you use 506B or 506C for your syndications?
We use a C currently. It just seems to be a better model for us because when we're trying to, we have 1.6 on one raise and 9 million on another. We're getting ready to start a second one or third one that'll be right about 6 million. We need the ability to advertise, and a B doesn't allow you to do that. I don't have that many buddies.
Thank you.
So when you're talking about having predictable costs,
thanks for the question.
Because you're rebuilding the same thing over and over again. Back up to the point in your career when you weren't building the same thing over and over again, and you were having a hard time maybe nailing down your costs. Who are the people that are going to help you do that? If early on in your journey as a developer, to say, okay, I need to get these costs nailed down before I feel comfortable proceeding with this project. At what point are you able to do that? How early in the project are you able to do that? Who are you using, and how much does that typically cost to say, this is how much it'll cost to design and build this particular thing?
Well, the reality is I have an unfair advantage to you and to Frank, and that's because I build in the same marketplace every year.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
I know what my costs are. I have instead of going, hey, that block is going to run somewhere between $16 and $18 a square in the wall, I can know that I'm going to do the same thing again and again, and I know exactly how many block I'm going to need because I built that building 5 times. So I have honed it a little further, but I tend to stay in that same market so that I'm repeating the same process in the same market where, I heard you say you have one project in Idaho Falls and then you're turning around and you're in Little Rock, Arkansas. Those are very
Mm-hmm.
different markets. So your cost per foot, even your rents are not the same.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not smart enough to keep all that stuff straight. So I stay at home. I've been building in the same valley for 30 years. So I have that advantage.
Okay. Yeah, so that's why we're looking at this project in Salt Lake, because I feel like I need to have my eyes on it a lot more closely than I would something that has a very light value add versus a heavy value add or ground up. Just when you're kind of figuring all that stuff out. So the costs have been difficult to nail down though, because first project is just going to be tough to find your team, to get everything done, and it's scary to pull the trigger, start writing checks when you're like, I don't know if this project is going to work. So I guess you can kind of look at it like an education. You're going to pay for it one way or the other. You'll learn a lot when you start.
But I hate paying classes I don't use. I mean, the last thing I want is a liberal arts degree, right? But the other thing that you might do, Emma, is you might be reaching out to large property management companies in the area
Mm-hmm.
about the subcontractors that they know of. You might be reaching out to appraisers because they would have information on who's doing what, who's doing value add in the area.
Mm-hmm.
It's amazing what information you can get by doing some of those back road conversations. And the other thing that I know is there's always a really decent sized remodel contractor in every town.
Mm-hmm.
And if you get with him, he will tell you that he uses the same subcontractors all the time. He's very consistent at it, and he can tell you a lot of what that's going to cost. And it may be higher than what you want to spend, but I've often found that getting the news I don't want to hear early saves me time.
Mm-hmm.
Rather than getting a subcontractor that says, oh yeah, I can do that for 40 grand. And then you come to find out, and he was only talking about the material, and then there was
Mm-hmm.
labor involved, or he thought you were buying the material. So now he's only got the labor covered, And so I've always found that there are other resources in that particular town that will give you an accurate accounting of that information.
Well, I remember when I very first started looking into investing in real estate, and I was at a meeting with some commercial investors, and they said, just skip residential if you want to do commercial, just go straight for it. And I thought, okay, I can do that, but at the same time, I had no idea how I was going to do that. I just knew that he said I could, so I was going to. And I feel the same way with development. It's always just been something I've wanted to do for years and years and years, and been fascinated with. And I want to just get straight to it, but it's tough. It's tough to transition from one to the other. And that advice of just skipping residential and going straight for commercial, if I knew that's what I wanted to do, was fantastic advice. But it took me a year of kind of poking at it before I was able to do a project, because there was just a ton of stuff to learn, and some of the stuff I had to pay for. I had to shell out some money on either projects that didn't pan out, or going and paying for a service or something from a provider, and then ended up not moving forward the project, those types of things. So I'm just wondering if development's going to be more of that same type of activity, where if that's what I know I'm doing, I just need to go and do it. I feel a little, just kind of go through that feeling a little bit lost phase, but just keep moving. I don't know.
Well, and the other thing too, Emma, that I've found is that it's, I had a friend of mine tell me one time, and he tells everybody this, so I'm not that special, but he said there's two things you got to have in real estate. One, either you got to have the deal or you got to have the money. If you don't have one or the other, nobody wants to talk to you. And so a lot of times what I've found is that if you have the deal, if you can figure out, like, well, I'm going to use your friend for an example that has the 104 units approved, and he has the deal. The thing that I have seen in my own life, and the thing that I see with some other people that makes their life harder, and I'm saying that I did this wrong and I made my life harder, is I thought having the deal was everything. And what I realized is you can't eat a piece of land. That piece of land has got to do something in order to pay your mortgage. It's not as simple as a value add that will start making you money the minute you buy it. It will start making its own payment the minute you buy it. So what I have seen people do is die on that hill, when in reality, if you've got a piece of land and no money, you might be worth 15 to 18% in a GP. That's all you're worth. If you have the money and coming in on the land deal, you're going to be worth a majority of the GP, unless there's something else you're going to involve, or you've got another process and another piece coming in very quickly. So you've got to kind of stack your financing, and you've got to have a way to get your guy into your GP on your land and out pretty quickly through an equity raise, because otherwise he'll want a lot of the deal. But again, it's better to do a deal and only get 20% of the deal or 15% of the deal and have done the deal than not do the deal because you didn't even bother with, you were never able to get the land bought.
Yep. Yeah. It's a lot of ways it's so similar to the value add multifamily, and it's the things that are different, it's kind of trip you up, but it's kind of fascinating when you start to find those differences, because that's really how you can start making the progress. And I just always been a fan of just get out there and put your hands on something. You're going to learn a lot more by intending to do it than watching every YouTube video and listen to somebody else talk about it. Just go get your hands on a project and start taking a bite out of it, and hope it works out. But you're going to learn a ton just by going after it.
Yes, you will. Kind of like a dog chasing a car. If you catch it,
oops,
it's still going to teach you a lot.
So, hey, we want to kind of start to wrap up a little bit, and if anybody wants to ask some questions, or wants to meet one of the other people that we talked to, that they said something that intrigued you and you want to hop on, spend a couple of minutes if anybody has anything they want to add there. Any last questions, or for Shannon or any of the other guests that we have? Jason, let's unmute you. There you go.
Good. I just had one question on the 506c when you're raising money for like new development deals. So since you're allowed to advertise, is that something that is generally done by the, one of the syndicator or general partners that, they run all of their own advertisements and bring these people with the money, or is it you as the developer who's coordinating, the majority of the deal, and you're actually paying for all those advertising fees and really, the majority of the GP, because you're bringing those people directly, all those accredited investors?
Yeah, so that's a good question. So, Jason, in a 506c, you cannot be just a money raiser. You have to be part of the general partnership, and you have to have duties that are relevant. So you can't just be the money raiser. Now, what I have is I have a partner of mine who is the money side of things, but he also arranges all the financing, and he also coordinates all the legal documents. And so he does other things that fulfill that role that allows him to be he's on the paper side, right? He's the one that is doing that. And so and I keep him at a fairly small percentage because I do everything else. And so I pay for the advertising. I own the click funnel. I own the traffic generation. I am the one that has the conversations about how this, is going to go together. And he's the one that has the conversation with the investor about the final sign up and any, questions like that. And so you can split that up any way you want, but if you and I were to do a deal and you said, well, I'm just here to raise the money, that doesn't really qualify under 506c. So you would have to do more than that. And so you would be in charge of, dealing with the lawyer and some other things like that, and making sure that all of those pieces go together, because you can't just get paid for raising money. Right, Frank?
Frank, you're not muted.
Oh, there you go.
There you go.
I'm here.
Your mic's off.
I agree 100%. You cannot just be a capital raiser. You might be able to get a certain percentage for signing the note, for being an asset manager, for doing the underwriting, for talking to all the investors. But yeah, I agree.
And typically,
there's a lot of value that.
Oh, sorry, keep going, Shannon.
Go ahead, Emma.
I was just going to say, usually everybody.
Well, typically there's a lot of little things like that can be done that stick with the paperwork.
Yeah, got a little
Ladies
lag here.
first.
Sorry about that.
You guys aren't too far away from each other. I mean, like I said, I'm calling from Rhode Island here, and I got the timing down.
Yeah, it's a little off. No, it's just most.
Well,
most
Frank, I'm not in Idaho.
Oh yes, I forgot. Yes, he's
he's
at an undisclosed location right now.
Like Area 51.
No.
He's at his master complex out there.
No, yeah.
Yeah.
Where there's no coronavirus allowed.
Yes.
Jason, did that answer your question? I'm not sure I was quite clear on exactly what you were asking as far as who's raising the capital or who's paying for all that. I think that's part of what's negotiated for the percent of ownership. And I'll use a specific example with Frank. Frank came into our partnership with a very specific job. And he went above and beyond that job in several ways. And so we had to go back to the negotiating table and say, all right, so you've provided a lot more value here than we originally anticipated, and did a lot more work than originally anticipated. And so we renegotiated that stake. And so that's just the way that it goes. It's always going to be an evolving thing. And sometimes it's like what Shannon was saying, they always start high, I always start low. But sometimes, like in Frank's case, we're like, Frank, we want you to be motivated. We want to know what you need to continue doing this above and beyond that you've been doing, because it's fantastic. So what do you need to feel appreciated and want to continue? So the negotiations can go a lot of different directions based on how much value that person's adding. Another example is some friends of mine, they had somebody coming in and his main job was capital raiser, and he had his peripheral jobs to stay legal, because you can't just raise capital. So he had a few other things he was in charge of doing. But at the end of the day, he brought in zero capital. And so he just agreed to step out of the deal at that point, and somebody else took over those other duties that he had. So, I mean, sometimes that happens. But they couldn't cut him out of the deal because he didn't bring in capital. He had to agree to say, yeah, you're right, this isn't working out. But he could have forced his way to stay in there at his original, whatever he negotiated for those other tasks.
Yeah, and that absolutely answered my question. I really appreciate it. I did understand the responsibilities of the requirement of having the additional responsibilities. I was just curious as far as how the actual money raising by itself it's usually structured, which Shannon has a lot of experience, and so he's already built those system funnels, and he's already done a lot of the legwork to advertise and be able to raise his own capital. But for other people that are just starting, if you're bringing in these capital raisers that have other responsibilities, how much of the advertising and responsibility can you pass on to them, as a marketing major?
Well, and that's Jason, that's a really good question, and there's a lot of that advertising that can be done just with the person's time. I mean, I think. Frank, you've got 10,000 people on Instagram. I mean, that took some time to build that, but that's a huge resource that you have to be able to reach back into a basically a Rolodex of 10,000 people. So doing things like that, where you don't think that that's going to pay you immediately, that is a great source for someone to be building up to raise capital in the future.
Absolutely. Yeah, I agree.
So you don't always have to pay for the advertising.
And it's gonna be different people depending on what works in that partnership. Every partnership's different unless you keep working with the same people over and over again. But that's not going to happen with us, Frank, is it? We're done after that. No.
We've already talked about.
I know, it's like you find something that works, you find a partnership that's working, and it's like you keep pushing to keep working with those people, because sometimes it can be tough. It's like dating. So I guess, Shannon, if you're going to give us some parting advice for those of us who have not done this before, what would be the next step we should take if we decided this is the direction, like what Cyrem was talking about, this is where I'm going, but I have this experience in multifamily, value add multifamily, what would be the next step that we would take to push us down this path in general?
Essentially the one thing that every person in this group could bring to a deal is the property, is the land, is the find the piece of land and start that process, and then find your development partner that has done this before and say, okay, listen, maybe this is worth 20%. Here's the thing. I only want 10%, but I want to sit in your pocket for the next 12 months or 14 months while we do this. I want to see every twist, every turn. I want to be entitled to the information, because as I've always found out, it's a lot more expensive than a college course, but it's something I'm willing to pay attention to, so I'll get a lot more out of it. So at the end of the day, what I've seen is that those people that will come with the deal and the desire to be mentored will get a lot farther down the road, because people they'll do a deal with them. They'll jump in and they'll say, you know what, I'd be more than happy to teach you that. I see that you're not motivated on this deal by money alone. You're motivated to learn more, to do the next thing, to take the next step. And that is where a lot of mentorship programs come out of, where I like to mentor people, is they really have a keen interest in my knowledge. But there's got to be something that we can work on that is a benefit that they bring to the table. So bring the land. Find a piece in your area that you can rezone, that is on the edge, that you can get some terms on. I mean, we're all good at digging up a deal. Dig up a land deal, and then find someone that's interested in it that makes sense.
If somebody, because a lot of us here have capital to place, what would you say if somebody came to you with that same scenario, but instead of the land, they said, I have X amount of dollars. I want 5 or 10% of the GP, and I'll be your task rabbit, and you'll mentor me, and I'll ride along for this journey. How much capital would you say somebody would have to bring into maybe one of your average size deals for you to say, yeah, let's do this?
Well, I mean, if we wanted to do something like the Colorado project, that's we needed $300,000.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if you had enough that I didn't have to go tie up a piece of land, I knew that I had everything I needed to get the land purchased, the permits drawn, the building permits ready. I had everything else. That really doesn't take that much. Like I said in that example, I mean, that was worth $400,000. So if somebody had that to bring to the table and said, I have this, help me get it finished, help me get plans on it, help me get permits on it, help me get the rest of it done, help introduce me to the people that are going to loan me the money to build this, because you have to have a general partner or general contractor that has experience in multifamily. They tend to frown on do-it-yourselfers doing, stuff like that. And so if someone came in with something as small as, I know that sounds funny, something as small as, $350,000, it's a very doable deal.
Okay. Yeah, and that kind of just gives us, for those of us who are already limited partners or who are aiming for that, kind of where we need to come in to buy our way into a general partnership on a deal like this. That's actually really helpful, because some of us are going to go that direction instead of the land direction. Depends on where we are and who we are and what kind of network we already have in place. All right. Last call, closing time. Start singing Don't Stop Believing. I'm going to kill the recording. Speak now, forever hold your peace. Anybody have any last questions or something to add, or somebody they want to talk to? All right. Okay, thanks everybody for coming. I did record this. I will be posting it in the Facebook group. This is the first time I've recorded a Google Meet, and so everybody cross your fingers and say a little prayer that I did it correctly, and I actually have a recording to post at the end of this. But it should show up in there sometime, this weekend, and the chat was recorded as well, so everybody's contact information should be in there, so you can kind of grab a hold of people, and we can keep networking over there in that group. So we're meeting again next month, last Thursday of the month. Stick it on your calendar, same time, 6:30. I'm going to try to do an in-person event at a local Salt Lake venue, but we're going to live cast it as well. So we'll see if we can get together in person finally in July. So, all right. Thanks so much, Shannon. Awesome job. You're like the wizard behind the curtain on this stuff. It's great.
Thank you very much. Really appreciate the content. Information.
All right. Have a good night,
and then
everybody.
If you guys have any further questions, feel free to find me on social media.
Yep, and he's on the Facebook group as well. So just let's holler and go get some deals done. Awesome, everybody. Have a good night. Thanks to everyone for coming.